So if we look at the objectives, you can work through those yourselves. Nothing dramatic. As I said, something brand new. We'll talk about this. We don't really have the option to do that right now. Right, so when we think of strategic innovation, the simple truth is that the only way organizations survive is if they constantly push the envelope in terms of newness, in introducing new technologies and finding new ways of doing things. So the focus in terms of strategic innovation is that being different, improving all the time, adding new technologies gives you an option of being ahead of the group and staying ahead of the group. Now, key in terms of innovation, it's not just creativity, because creativity is the idea, and it is the step beyond the idea where you actually turn that creativity into something functional, into something new, into something that is usable by particular individuals. So when we think of these solutions, we often think of trying to find solutions for potential problems that might not exist at this stage. It also, we find solutions for unarticulated needs. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, but the marketers here would talk about how your job is to identify needs. These modern approaches essentially create needs. So think of some of the apps that you have on your phone that you never thought of as being something you needed. And it's the best example of needs being created. I mean, there are some very strange apps out there. And although you didn't know you had a need for a particular thing, those apps certainly create those needs. And also, it's about looking at market needs and finding ways of improving the way we serve our customers, but more importantly, also improving the lives of our customers in terms of new products and services. So it's about doing things differently, it's about uniqueness, it's about creativity, but it also is about driving the economy. So often we see economies thrive on the basis of these new innovations, these new technologies. So if we see where China is in terms of their way of competing, lots of innovation, sometimes stealing a lot of innovations as well. But the focus is essentially on newness, on creating something different, on advancing technology. Now, whether we talk about the first Apple standalone computer to Google to smartphones and everything else that's happened in between, every single new innovation essentially creates opportunities for economic growth. And every time we do that, it creates more jobs and it advances society in general. So if we look at innovation, there are a couple of things that we need to know. The first one is that we have to understand how to act as a catalyst for this process. Innovation just doesn't happen by itself. It requires an environment where people are able to test and retest and challenge the status quo and essentially be given the freedom to constantly move technology ahead. So when we think of Google, and if you look at Google in particular, if you look at the more bit on Google, the simple truth is this is a company that has a culture based around innovation, where 20% of your work life is dedicated to creating your own new products and services that obviously will belong to Google once you've created them. But it's about newness. It's about adding new applications. It's about changing the way we look at the world. I quite like this term there, the fuzzy front end of product development. It is that stage where we are creating products that may or may not work, that may impress or may be too gimmicky. And it is about advancing all the time. And remember what I said, a lot of the kinds of things that we see as advances now create specific needs. These are needs that often customers didn't know they had. And I can tell you now, if you look at your apps, I guarantee you that within those apps, you've downloaded stuff without knowing that that was a particular need. And now you cannot live without that app. So in terms of the organization, the second bit there is about design thinking. It's about creating an environment where people push the envelope, but it's also about getting people thinking. It's about constantly getting people to learn. It's about constantly allowing individuals opportunities to grow their skill set. And more importantly, it is about freedom to be creative. It's about giving those individuals the freedom to make the magic happen. So when we look at innovation, and this is likely a question that you'll see, there are two dimensions. The first one are the supposed blue ocean strategies. When you think of the blue ocean strategy, it's the kind of organization that creates a new industry. It's the kind of the organization that creates an industry and arrives there first, and then later people start catching up. So when we think of Google writing its first search algorithm, it created a brand new industry in terms of search engines. If we think of Apple and the first smartphone, it created a brand new industry in terms of smartphones. So the focus essentially is about creating this industry and getting to the industry first. One of the things we know about those blue ocean waters and those blue ocean industries is that there is something called first mover advantage. And first mover advantage essentially means that if you get there first, it's very difficult for your competitors to catch up. So when we think of Google, despite the fact that there are other alternatives in terms of search engines, maybe even better alternatives in terms of search engines, people will take time to catch up, and Google appears as a word in the dictionary. So brand new, you get there first, it's uncontested, you set the rules of the game. The one thing we know about these blue ocean organizations is that they create best practices as they operate. They essentially learn while they work. Red ocean industries are very, very, very different. This is where there is a feeding frenzy. There are lots of existing competitors, lots of existing people fighting over the same market share, all wanting to grab a small piece of the action. And remember, because there's so many people who are fighting for that, the bits and pieces over there, it becomes very, very tough to be competitive. And that's where those specific business strategies that we've just looked at will apply. This red ocean is a feeding frenzy. It's a place where we have blood in the water. It is a place where it's very difficult to survive. So when we look at innovation opportunities and innovation theories, I think the simple truth is that we want to have theories about innovation because it allows us to create an organization where people are allowed to be creative and where they're allowed to push the boundaries. There's a specific term that we need to pay attention to here: disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is where you create something that essentially kills off and disrupts existing industries. Give me an example of the industries that have been disrupted as a consequence of the smartphone. Give me an example of industries disrupted as a consequence of the smartphone. Camera industry gone. Print media gone. I mean, if you think of newspapers, have to reconsider the way they compete. What other industries were disrupted? Tablets gone. Yeah, the tablets industry gone. GPS gone. Music industry disrupted completely. CDs gone. So here you have one single device that essentially rewrote the rules about the game and impacted several other industries. Guys, people who manufacture alarm clocks, gone. Let's be honest, alarm clocks don't exist anymore. Your phone does that for you. Other industries that have been killed because of the disruption caused by smartphones. Alarm clocks gone. Alarm clocks gone. I don't know if people still have an alarm clock separate from their phone. So the truth is that in order to innovate, we need to understand what makes innovation work, and that's why we have these theories. This is a tough section, guys. I encountered this the first time in my master's, and they've now put it back into this textbook. So we've got to go through each of these theories. There they are. There are a range of them. I've never seen an exam question on it, but I'm not going to predict that there won't be an exam question on that. So if we look at those theories of innovation, the first one, Kondratiev, he says and argues that innovations don't happen in a consistent way, that essentially innovations are grouped together, and then over time those essentially become standard practice. Then we have another clump of innovations that will change the rules of the game for a particular period of time. So he talks about, in terms of these long waves, as the recovery phase. So here we have this idea of a new innovation. So think of the steam engine, think of digital technology, think of electric vehicles as innovations. And then you'll have this recovery, and you'll see the economy improving, prosperity, and we saw that in the 80s with the dot-com type organizations. Then the economy starts to slow it down again, drops to low levels until we get to the next stage again. The suggestion is, in terms of Kondratiev's theory, is that innovations happen at a point, they're clumped together, and then we ride the wave based on those innovations. So think steam engines, think the motor vehicle, think digital technology. Those were clumped together, and we rode the wave of those successes for a while. Guys, in terms of how disruptive innovation works, it talks about these long wave cycles, and they change the rules of the game in terms of markets. We then buy new products, we buy new services, people enter into new careers, and that career and that product and that service and that industry will become stale over time until we have the next innovation. So if we think of where electric cars are now, petrol engines will soon be something of the past. So we're now creating technology in terms of electric cars. I don't know what is beyond electric cars. I know, for example, that that Uber has invested in flying taxis, and apparently they're already available in some centers. So these radical innovations start this long wave. They happen at the beginning of the long wave, and then we see prosperity on the basis of that. Artificial intelligence driving, for example, the fourth industrial revolution. And it changes everything in terms of pestle society. It changes how we interact with trade unions. It changes the kinds of jobs we have. It changes the way we manufacture and so forth. So think of the introduction of digital technology and how digital technology had changed the world, and how many industries disappeared and how many new jobs were created. I quite like this term, Schumpeter's theory of creative destruction. And we've got to take that first statement with a pinch of salt. We know that if we grow an economy at 2% is not enough for South Africa. We need to grow at 6% in order to start attending properly to unemployment and poverty. Now, in terms of this idea of creative destruction, what happens, it deliberately goes out to rewrite the rules of the game. So when we think of the first digital technologies, it changed everything prior to that in terms of the analog age. You know, all of a sudden TV was different. All of a sudden the way we communicated was different. And that's what the creative destruction does. It destroys what had gone before, but it rewrites the rules of the game, creates new opportunities. So when we look at the idea of creative destruction, is we have to constantly make sure that our business strategy adjusts in line with that. So in terms of Schumpeter's theory, yeah, the first one is essentially it will actively drive an industrial revolution, and the reality is that past revolutions and the revolutions now will always aim to essentially benefit society. Think of how much better society is now that we have smartphones, that we have smart cars, that we have digital technologies. Just give me a second, guys. Okay. So the reality is that when we look at the S-curve and disruptive innovation, and disruptive innovation comes back to haunt us a little bit. Okay, please just, okay, I think people can wait a second. Okay, guys, in terms of technology, it really means that with disruptive innovation is that industry leadership changes hands. If you think of moving from manufacturing technologies to where we are now, the simple truth is that industry rules change all the time, and those people that make money in industries essentially change. Back in the 1900s, if you owned a car manufacturing company, you were wealthy. Now, if you own something in IT, if you own something in online shopping, if you own something in digital technology, you become wealthy very, very quickly. So what happens in terms of this disruption, guys, let me just quickly answer this. Right, so in terms of that, when we think of different technologies, the theory is that every technology has a natural limit. So we know, for example, in terms of our computer technologies, that we are getting to the point of the natural limit of traditional ways of processing information. And obviously, we've improved our processors. We've put processors together on single processors. But we've got to the point where our software is so resource intensive that we have to find a new way. So in terms of traditional computing, we've got to that point. And those of you that follow this kind of technology, we are now moving towards quantum computing. And there are a number of rules in terms of quantum computing, and I'll let you read that. My son explains it a lot better than me. But essentially, quantum computing, although at this stage not as efficient as it should be, will have very few limitations, and certainly will surpass the limitations that there are now. The same thing in terms of diesel and petrol technology. They have natural limitations, and that's why we are moving towards electric technology. So the rule in terms of this is that every technology will hit this point where beyond that you can do nothing to improve it, and then you have to change the rules. Computer technology, traditional computer technology, my apologies, versus quantum computing, and certainly quantum computing very much the future. So we talk about the technical potential, and as I said, every technology has technical potential before we need to change it. So cell phones had technical potential, then smartphones arrived. We drive what we have in terms of that technical potential obviously through research and development, but we get to a point where we can't get any better. So in terms of the S-curve, it tells us that we have competitive advantage based on certain things. Your existing technology reaches maturity. You need to know exactly when that point is, because if you keep working with the existing technology, it's like flogging a dead horse. You're not going to get more out of a petrol engine. There's this limit that you have. You'd have to look at new hybrid or green technologies. And then the reality is that we talk about certain industries being caught off guard. Talk about blindness in terms of the successor technologies. So when we think of, and I'm sorry to use this example, Kodak ignored digital technology and went from the biggest camera company in the world to not existing because they ignored the S-curve realities. Okay, you can have a look at that, and certainly there are new options in terms of tire manufacture available. So in terms of the kinds of things that cause market losses, the first one, technological myopia. Yeah, Nokia believing that the candy bar design would be the future, not believing that touchscreen would be the future. Kodak, we've spoken about it as well. Misreading market signals, thinking that essentially the market is leveling off and that you might have to have some basic improvement, not realizing that the technology is being replaced. So ask BlackBerry where they are now. And then we talk about a culture trap, which means we get locked into a way of doing things. Nokia and the candy bar design. It took a lot of companies a lot of time to move, vehicle companies to move to electric, because they believed they could do more with petrol, and that's why Tesla became such a reality. Dominant design theory. Every industry develops along a particular path, and what happens in terms of this dominant design is that we have these specific standards that apply to technologies. So when we think of dominant design, a USB connect is a USB connect is a USB connect, because that is the dominant design. Blu-ray technology is Blu-ray technology, irrespective of which competitors' products you use, because that is the dominant design. Not the best example, but when we think of Android, it is one of the dominant designs. So if you want to use Android, essentially it's available, and it gives obviously Google significant advantage. So it started off with assembly manufacturing industries, and we've got dominant designs everywhere, whether it's Bluetooth, whether it is your USB connects, it doesn't matter. And what you do is you manage those three elements there. And then the reality is that when we get to a dominant design, it shows that we're moving beyond a specific industry cycle. Think of what Bluetooth has done to the world. How has Bluetooth technology changed the world? Bluetooth is everywhere. It's in my car. I link to my TV through Bluetooth. Bluetooth is absolutely everywhere because it is the dominant design. And dominant design act as industry standards, and you can see some of the examples there. Blu-ray, governments influence it, set the design standard. Sometimes companies get it wrong, and unfortunately, I'm sitting with a group of students that will not recognize that word there. Some of you might not even recognize VHS. What is VHS? What is VHS? It's the old tapes, the traditional cassette tapes. What is Betamax or Betamax? Betamax was Sony's version of the cassette tape, and Sony believed that's the future. It was smaller, it was more efficient. But Sony made a single mistake with Betamax, so it was a direct alternative to VHS. Sony went it alone. They didn't get all the competitors on board, and that's why VHS became the standard. When Sony did this with Blu-ray, there was an alternative available from Hitachi, an HD alternative available from Hitachi. What Sony, however, did is they gave the technology to their competitors, so that became the industry standard. And essentially, there they got it wrong, there they got it right. Guys, and then just also bandwagon effects is that you build up these networks of things. We see it now in terms of cloud technologies. If you don't have a cloud and if you don't have devices linked to the cloud, you're not competing. And the standard in terms of the cloud essentially links and ties people into long-term relationships with companies. Yeah, just to show you, that is the Betamax and that is the VHS. Far more efficient, smaller, more compact, better quality, but Sony went it alone. VHS went to the competitors and said, let's make this the standard. Yeah, so in terms of dominant design theory, essentially, we look at creating products that can cut across different industries, and then also we use technological innovations in a cumulative way. Think, for example, of Bluetooth. Give me some of the things that you link through Bluetooth other than your car. What else do you link via Bluetooth? Who has a speaker that links via Bluetooth? Headsets, Bluetooth headsets, headphones, yeah. TV speaker through Bluetooth. So what Bluetooth has done, it's created a barrier to entry. If your electronic device doesn't do Bluetooth, you don't compete. It's as simple as that. Absorptive capacity is an interesting theory as well, and you'll see this in examples around Kodak and certainly BlackBerry, Nokia, but we also see the positive of it in terms of Apple and Samsung and those kinds of Huawei companies. What it talks about is that the world changes so much that the fact for any organization to survive, it has to change too. So what happens is we are constantly faced with the challenge of absorptive capacity. And it's about taking new information in, making sense of that information, and then rewriting what you understand to be the rules of the game. So it's about taking information in, and it is about rewriting what you understand to be the rules of the game. So part of that is to always know where you've been. So we've had prior knowledge, and if you think of the brain as a traditional old-style hard drive in a computer, on everyone's brain we have theories about people, things, and events. So we have theories about how the world works. So in terms of Kodak, the theory was that everyone would want a spool type film. People would keep buying spools, they would take pictures, and they would then take that spool to have those pictures developed. Digital technology came along. Now remember, digital technology was designed by an engineer. Digital photography was designed by an engineer in Kodak. He presented that technology to Kodak, and they said, no, absolutely not. The rule is people will always want to have a spool, people would want photos developed, etc. And obviously, digital companies jumped on it, and they realized that that rule is wrong. So what absorptive capacity is, it means you have these theories about the world on your head, inside your brain, my apologies. But you take in information and you change those theories based on the information that comes into your head. If you're a car company that still manufactures petrol engines, your belief about the world is that petrol drives cars. We've seen other technologies, and companies who adjust have rewritten what they believe to be the rules of the game. Absorptive capacity is really about promoting innovative learning. It's about constantly questioning. It's about constantly rewriting what we believe to be the rules of the game. And then also, in terms of that cumulativeness, it really is about building up absorptive capacity over time, that it becomes part of an organized DNA. And then also we look at expectation formation, and it really is the idea that we pick up changes in the external environment and we learn from those changes and we don't get locked into the past. Yeah, there's some headachy ones. Path dependency. Essentially, organizations build up path dependency over time, which means they become good at doing things in a particular way. So they become good at building petrol engines. And essentially what happens is that because of that path dependency and because of that dependency being part of the organization's DNA, we could have that stand in the way of advances. So the first one, we stop learning, Nokia and the candy bar design phone, Kodak and the spool form. We get locked out. Where is Nokia today? Where is Kodak today? Where is BlackBerry today? And then you fall into a competency trap where you become so good at doing something that you start believing your own theories. Think, for example, of Reader's Digest. And I'm not going to explain Reader's Digest, but they used to send books and you used to buy books online. If you're still selling encyclopedias door to door, you're stuck in a competency trap.